Do you remember your friends? Not just the ones you see on holidays, not the ones you talk to in passing, but the ones you thought would always be there. I did. I had 100 faces I trusted, 100 voices I believed would answer if I ever called. But here I am, 93 years old, and no one came, no one stayed, not one. It's a strange thing to realize how easy it is for people to disappear, how quietly they can slip away while you're still smiling, still believing, still pretending everything is normal. You see, there's a truth no one tells you, a truth wrapped in small betrayals, tiny absences, subtle shifts that you dismiss because you want to believe. You want to believe that the people you love, your friends, are forever, but they are not. And the thing is, you often only notice it too late. Too late to say the words you should have said. Too late to mend what could have been preserved. Too late to hold someone's hand while they still reached for yours. I'm not speaking of some abstract idea of loneliness. I am speaking of the kind of emptiness that sits at the edge of your bed at night, whispering back the memories of laughter now long gone, the kind that turns your own home into a hollow echo chamber of what used to be. I remember the last time I saw most of them. I remember the phone calls that never came, the invitations that quietly stopped, the letters that went unanswered. And at first I convinced myself it was temporary. They said busy, life gets in the way. But then the gaps became months. Months became years, and eventually I understood something terrifying. I was alone, and not just alone in the way you can call someone if you need them, alone in the way that makes you question, did I ever really have anyone at all? There is a reason I'm telling you this, a reason this story matters. It's not just my story. It is the story of everyone who believes that friendships, loyalty, and time are infinite, because they are not. And soon you will see exactly how it happens, how a house full of voices can become a house of silence. And when you do, you might not like what you discover next. When you are young, you believe in permanence. You believe that the people who laugh with you today will laugh with you tomorrow, that the bonds forged in schoolyards, in neighborhood streets, in the hum of shared routines are unbreakable. I had that belief, stronger than anything. Every birthday, every holiday, every small victory or quiet defeat, I thought I was surrounded. I thought I was safe. Safe in the knowledge that I had friends who would never leave, friends who would show up when I needed them, friends who knew me truly, inside and out. But safety is an illusion. It's fragile, like a glass ornament hanging by a thread, trembling under forces you cannot see. I remember the gatherings, the crowded living rooms, the shared meals, the laughter that felt so certain. You would have thought those moments would last forever, and for a time they did, or at least they seemed to. There is a psychology behind this. Humans are wired to assume continuity, to assume that people once close will remain close. Psychologists call it the illusion of permanence. We want to believe in a safe world, even when the cracks are there, even when small absences start to appear. We rationalize them. They are busy. Life is complicated. Next week it will be different. It is comforting. Too comforting. I remember one early warning sign, a minor thing at the time, almost laughable. A friend cancelled lunch. Again, no explanation, and I laughed it off. Of course things happen, I told myself. They still make it next time. But there is a pattern in these minor fractures. In hindsight, you see that these small disappearances, these brief silences, are not accidents. They are the first notes in a quiet symphony of absence. It is like watching a tree in autumn. At first, Only a few leaves fall, you barely notice. Then branches grow bare, one by one, and eventually the tree stands empty, stripped of everything it once held. We all resist seeing it. We cling to the illusion of safety, because acknowledging the truth is terrifying. That truth is simple. People leave, life moves on, and sometimes they leave you first. I still remember the subtle changes in tone, the fading enthusiasm in messages, the invitations that became more formal, less personal. I convinced myself I was imagining it. I told myself that my mind was playing tricks, that friendship is not measured by absence. But even as I told myself that, a shadow began to form, a sense of unease that settled deep in the chest, quiet and insistent. Something was changing, something I could not yet name. And yet I did nothing. I believed in the illusion. I believed that safety, once established, would protect me indefinitely, until the first real crack appeared. And when it did, it would not stop at just one. The first cracks are easy to dismiss, almost comforting in their subtlety. A missed call, a forgotten promise, an invitation that never comes. You tell yourself it's nothing. Life happens, you say. It's just not important. I remember the first time I felt it. The invisible shift. A friend I had known for decades didn't answer my call. Not once, not twice. And then weeks passed. I waited, I hoped. I imagined reasons that felt acceptable. Maybe they were busy. Maybe they forgot. Surely it wasn't permanent. But it was. It begins with denial. Denial is the human armor. It whispers, this is temporary. It's not real. Things will return to normal. And for a while it works. You continue your routines, smiling at faces in town, attending events, answering the phone when someone calls, pretending that nothing has changed. Then come the small betrayals. The invitations you used to receive no longer arrive. You notice people are not around at the places you expect them. You remember their faces in your mind, but in the real world, they are absent. It's the kind of absence that feels like a shadow, almost intangible, almost ignorable, until one day it isn't. I remember one moment vividly. A neighbor, a friend from the neighborhood for 50 years, walked past me on the street as if I didn't exist. Not a nod, not a glance, not a word. I stood frozen, my hand halfway raised in greeting, my chest tightening, and for the first time I realized something. People can vanish without warning, without malice, simply because they choose to, or maybe because they forget. And there is a subtle terror in that realization that the people you love, the people who shaped your life, are not bound to stay, that their presence is conditional, fragile, fleeting. The cracks grow, almost imperceptibly, like hairline fractures in porcelain. You notice them if you look closely, but the urge to ignore them is stronger. The mind clings to what once was, desperately weaving explanations for what now is. I started to notice patterns. Certain friends would only reach out when it suited them. Others would make excuses that grew thinner over time. Invitations became rare. Conversations became short. And each absence, each broken promise, each missed greeting, it added weight, a weight I couldn't name at the time. And yet still, I hoped. Still, I pretended. Still, I believed the bonds that had lasted decades were unbreakable. But hope is fragile, and denial is not enough to protect you forever. Soon the fractures became impossible to ignore. What once could be laughed off now carried an undeniable sting, and the unease that had been a whisper became a persistent voice, a voice that said, "You are losing them, one by one, and you might not even notice until it's too late." And that is when the tension truly begins, the quiet, gnawing awareness that the world you believe to be stable is shifting under your feet, that people, the very people who defined your life, are slowly withdrawing, and no one is coming back to warn you. The cracks are not dramatic. They do not scream. They whisper, and that whisper, if ignored, becomes the sound of a world quietly unraveling around you. And I ignored it for a while. But ignoring it only made the next stage inevitable. Eventually the cracks are no longer subtle. They spread, they widen, and suddenly the absence is visible to everyone except you. For a long time, I clung to explanations. Life is busy. People are tired. Illness, travel, obligations. The stories were endless, and I swallowed them all. But deep down, I knew the truth I refused to name. I was being abandoned, one quiet step at a time. Escalation does not come with a warning. It creeps in under the cover of routine, a missed birthday, a family gathering where only strangers appear, a silence that fills the room louder than any conversation ever could. It is strange, the way humans justify what is happening around them. Friends, neighbors, even family members. Society itself has a way of normalizing absence, of turning desertion into something acceptable. Authorities, institutions, the world at large, they offer reasons for the loss of connection. People move on. We grow apart naturally. It's inevitable. And in that justification, denial finds fertile ground. I watched it happen around me. Friends making excuses for those who vanished. Family members laughing off absences. Even neighbors who once shared their lives openly, now pretending everything was fine. The world collectively agreed that loss was normal, that disconnection was acceptable, that I should simply adjust. But adjustment is not comfort. It is a quiet form of violence, the slow erasure of expectation and trust. Every ignored call, every broken promise, every empty chair at the table, it is a small erosion of your sense of reality. And when it accumulates, it feels like betrayal, even when no one meant to betray you. I remember standing at a family event, surrounded by faces I barely recognized. People spoke politely, but their eyes avoided me. Their laughter excluded me. And I realized I had become invisible, not through malice, not through anger, not through cruelty, but simply through the slow, steady retreat of everyone I had counted on. Denial is powerful. It keeps you from seeing what is happening until the consequences are unavoidable. I told myself over and over that it was temporary, that everyone would return, that the pattern would reverse. But it didn't stick. I tried small interventions, phone calls, invitations, letters, messages, and each time I was met with a polite deflection, a forgotten promise, a fading warmth. People didn't know or didn't care how quickly the world I had trusted was vanishing around me. And then it hit me. Escalation doesn't announce itself. It waits, it lingers, and when you finally notice the damage is already done, the faces that once filled my life were now ghostly. Conversations that once lingered for hours became silences. Invitations were no longer extended. I was left staring at empty spaces where laughter used to live. The heavy realization came slowly, like a fog rolling over a cliff. It settled over me, cold and persistent, and I knew in that moment that the life I thought I had was slipping away. Not suddenly, not violently, but quietly, in a series of small, almost imperceptible steps that I had convinced myself didn't matter. And the worst part, I had seen the warning signs. I had felt the subtle shifts. I had heard the whispers of absence. And still, I did nothing. Because denial, even when it fails, can be seductive. But failure has consequences. And soon, I would reach the point of no return. There is a moment in every story like this, a single point where the path splits. One side leads back to safety, to repair, to reconnection. The other leads to something else, something permanent. For me, that moment came quietly. It was not a dramatic confrontation, not a sudden betrayal. It was a choice, a decision made over years of small, almost invisible concessions. I remember the last real chance I had, an invitation sent months earlier to a gathering that included many of the friends I had known for decades. I debated whether to go. I convinced myself that I was tired, that it didn't matter, that perhaps the invitation wasn't sincere, and I stayed home. It seems inconsequential in the moment. It seems harmless. But that night I crossed a line from which there is no return. The next day, a phone call I had expected did not come. The next week, another. Slowly, piece by piece, the threads that had once held me to the world began to unravel, and I realized too late that the opportunity to mend, to reach out, to reclaim what was slipping, had passed. Humans are strange in their way of ignoring final warnings. We treat life like a test we can retake, a bridge we can rebuild. We forget that some things once broken or abandoned do not return. I replay the moment in my mind often. I think about the people I could have called, the apologies I could have made, the conversations I could have initiated. But each imagined rescue, each what-if only sharpens the sense of loss. It does not repair it. It is the cruel paradox of friendship and trust. The very bonds you rely upon can vanish quietly without malice, until the only thing left is reflection. And reflection is not comfort, it is a mirror of regret. I remember lying awake that night, staring at the ceiling, feeling the emptiness settle like dust. The realization hit me with a weight I could not escape. I had watched the cracks grow, I had felt the shift, I had seen the warnings, and I had done nothing. It is easy to think of loss as sudden, dramatic, unavoidable, but often it is slow, invisible, accumulated over years of small decisions, small neglects and small denials. The point of no return is rarely marked by fireworks. It is marked by silence, by absence, by the quiet recognition that what you thought was permanent never was. I had crossed it, and from that moment on, nothing could be undone. The consequences of that night would not appear immediately. They would grow slowly, like shadows stretching over the walls at dusk, and when they arrived, they would leave me facing something I had never imagined, something unbearable. After the point of no return, life does not explode. It does not announce itself with fanfare. Instead, it seeps in, quietly, like a cold wind through the cracks of a forgotten house. I began to notice it in the small ways. Calls that once rang through the day no longer came. Mail that once brought invitations now brought only bills and advertisements. The streets I had walked 100 times felt emptier, quieter. Every familiar face, every friendly nod, slowly disappeared into shadows. It was not sudden, but it was relentless. The first real silence came in the evenings. Sitting alone in the dim glow of my living room, I listened to the echoes of my own thoughts, and they were loud, too loud. They reminded me of dinners once shared, of laughter that had filled rooms, of conversations that lingered until midnight, and then nothing. I walked the halls of my own home, imagining footsteps behind me, imagining voices, and each time I realized they were gone. The echoes were mine alone. It is a strange psychological terror, the kind that does not need a cause. You do not need an enemy. You do not need betrayal. The absence itself is enough to hollow you out, enough to make you question whether you were ever truly seen, ever truly known, ever truly loved. People try to normalize collapse. They say this is part of aging, or it's natural. But natural or not, it does not lessen the sting. It does not soothe the ache in your chest as you realize that the world you trusted, the people you relied upon, have receded beyond reach. I remember the first day I stopped checking the phone, not because I didn't care, but because I knew there would be nothing. Silence, and in that silence a new kind of fear took root, not of danger, but of emptiness. Weeks passed, then months, and slowly the life I had taken for granted, the network of friends, the warmth of shared time, the certainty of companionship, crumbled completely. There were no dramatic confrontations, no shouting, no fights, only absence, only quiet, only the oppressive, unrelenting weight of being left behind. And in that quiet, I felt the world shrink. The rooms of my house became smaller. The streets I once walked freely felt like corridors of solitude. The laughter I remembered so vividly now felt like it belonged to someone else, someone far away. Collapse is not sudden. It is atmospheric. It is confusion, fear, silence, shadows that linger long after the light has gone. And as I sat alone, night after night, I realized that some things, friendship, loyalty, presence, cannot be forced. They cannot be bought. They cannot be demanded. And when they leave, when the cracks widen beyond repair, the emptiness is all that remains. The collapse had taken everything I once believed in, and in its place there was only the echo of memories, a house full of silence, and the haunting knowledge that it could have been otherwise. But that knowledge came too late. After everything falls away, what remains is quiet, not the quiet of peace, but the quiet of absence, a silence so complete it presses against your chest, against your thoughts, against the memory of what once existed. I sit now, 93 years old, in a home that was once full of voices. The walls remember laughter, but no one else does. The chairs are empty, the tables bare, the memories hover like ghosts, familiar yet untouchable. It is in this aftermath that you understand the truth, the harsh, inescapable truth, that friendships, no matter how deep or long, are fragile. They can vanish quietly, subtly, until one day you realize you have nothing left. I think about the choices I made, about the invitations I ignored, the calls I postponed, the small actions I assumed didn't matter. And I see now how each tiny decision created a path toward isolation. The regret is not sudden. It is slow. It accumulates, layer upon layer, until it feels like it will crush you under its weight. And yet, I also see myself clearly. The mistakes, yes. The trust given too easily, perhaps. The hope held too tightly. But more than that, I see the illusions I lived under. That permanence is guaranteed. That presence is infinite. That love once given is inexhaustible. It is not. I try to reach back in my memory to the times when the world was bright, when friends surrounded me, and laughter was abundant. I remember the warmth of company, the certainty of shared moments, and I ache. I ache not just for what I have lost, but for what I failed to preserve. The emptiness is strange. It is not merely loneliness. Loneliness is temporary. Emptiness is permanent. It settles into the corners of your mind. It fills the spaces where voices used to be. It whispers in the dark that you were not noticed as you thought, that what you held dear was never as secure as you believed. And yet, in this emptiness, there is understanding, not comfort, not peace, but understanding, a recognition that life is delicate, that connection is fleeting, that people, our friends, our family, those we trust, can disappear in ways both subtle and irreversible. I have learned to walk through the silence, to sit with it, to breathe in the echoes of what used to be, and to remember that even the deepest bonds, no matter how treasured, are never guaranteed. This is the aftermath, the realization, the weight of decades slipping away unnoticed, the understanding that once the cracks widen, there is no repair, only reflection, only memory, only the quiet ache of what has been lost. And in this reflection, you begin to see the warning signs, not for yourself, but for those who may follow. Because while I cannot change the past, the lessons remain, the knowledge remains, and it is terrifying, because the same fate can happen to anyone unless you see it coming. Now, after decades of watching the world shrink, after the slow disappearance of everyone I trusted, I speak not just to tell my story, but to warn. You may be surrounded by laughter today. You may have friends, family, colleagues, all those familiar voices that fill your life with light, but I have seen how quickly it can vanish, how subtle the erosion is, how easy it is to believe in permanence until it is gone. Do not wait. Do not assume that absence is temporary, or that a missed call or a forgotten promise is meaningless. It is not. Each small neglect, each postponed visit, each ignored message is another crack forming, another thread fraying, another step toward the point of no return. Look around you, look at the people you love. Ask yourself, have I told them they matter? Have I been present, truly present? Or have I let routine and assumption carry the weight for me? Because one day you will realize the world has not abandoned you suddenly. It has whispered its departure for years, quietly, subtly, until you notice too late. And when you do, it is not dramatic. There is no final confrontation. There is only the quiet echo of absence, the weight of empty chairs, the ghost of conversations that will never happen again. This is not fear-mongering. It is observation. It is truth. It is the shadow that falls over everyone who assumes friendships, loyalty, and presence are guaranteed. So reach out, call, visit, listen, show up, not tomorrow, not next week, not when it's convenient, but now, before the cracks grow too wide, before the silence sets in, before you find yourself alone. Because one day you may wake up like I did, 93 years old, with no one left, and realize that everyone who mattered most has quietly disappeared. And by then, it will be too late.